Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Stephen walked slowly down the main street. His wife had asked him to stop by the children's store after work to pick up an order. Daria once again bought something for Liam and Frank, their 1.5-year-old twin sons. Daria is a wonderful mother and wife. Couldn't be better. Loving, caring, gentle. She has so much kindness and sincerity, so much humanity. That's probably why Stephen reached out to her during a difficult period of his life. He was in dire need of warmth, of acceptance. Stephen smiled, remembering that his beloved wife and children were waiting for him at home. The man could not get used to the idea that he had become a father. He had 2 sons, 2 eagles, 2 wings. Wow, what's happening to him? Daria, on the other hand, immediately fell into the role of a caring mother. As if she'd been waiting all her life to have children. Or maybe she had. Daria loved children very much. She felt sorry for the babies in orphanages. Having become a mother herself, she suddenly realized what those little ones were deprived of. Daria had even once cautiously asked her husband if he would ever mind. Not right now, but when the boys were a little older, to take a child from the orphanage. Stephen smiled. Then in that was all Daria was kind, involved, compassionate. There was so much kindness and love in her that there would be more than enough for both native and adopted children. A wonderful idea supported then-wife Stephen. Indeed, why not? A large family, many children, a house full of cup. This is happiness, light, cheerful, sunny. Daria. She once became for Stephen a ray of light in the dark kingdom of the saving straw, did not let him sink into the abyss of despair. This woman showed him that there was still meaning in life, that it was still possible for Stephen and pleasure and happiness. The man was grateful to her for that. It was Daria who was able to make their family strong, happy, and the warm house became a safe haven for Stephen. Here you will always be welcomed, listened to, supported. It is a place where you can feed on energy, reinforce your strength, rest, relax. Although, of course, with the appearance of the twins, the name Quiet Harbor for the apartment has become not quite suitable. It's so quiet, but it's great. The boys are so much fun to spend time with. They're getting older, starting to understand the rules of different games. Stephen sometimes has almost real soccer competitions with them. Goal posts labeled with large constructor parts, a big softball. Everything as it should be. Next thing you know, we need a couple more boys on the team right away. Stephen used to joke sometimes that we'd have to get some new brothers. No, smiled Daria. The next one would be a girl. Daria adored sons, but like all women, dreamed of having a daughter. Girls like to play soccer too. Stephen didn't give up. We'll teach them. Really, boys. Liam and Frank giggled happily. Of course, they didn't fully understand what they were talking about. But the little ones invariably drew a cheerful cheer from their parents. Stephen smiled at the thought of the children. But immediately his heart was squeezed by the same vague longing that had not let go since lunch. The man himself could not understand what was happening to him. Everything seemed to be fine. There's a promotion coming up at work. Stephen is appreciated, respected, promoted. Salaries do not hurt. On the contrary, the boss periodically writes a promising employee bonuses, and a lot. Stephen fully provides for his family without denying his wife and children anything. That is, everything is fine from this side. At home, things are also going great. Wonderful wife, beautiful and bright children. Parents are alive and well. I got family, I got friends, I got a good job. And the money's all right. It would seem live and be happy. But it's like the cats are scratching at my soul. While passing by a flower stall, Stephen witnessed an unusual scene. It interested him, made him stop and take his mind off his thoughts. A little girl about 8 or 9 years old. Slim, tall, tanned. Long hair hanging down her face. The girl was dressed in shorts that were clearly too small for her, and a cheap t-shirt with stains. Everything indicated that the child came from a poor family, to put it mildly. Stephen stopped, listening. He wondered what the girl was talking about with the flower seller, a woman with brightly painted and contemptuously compressed lips. You see, I could only save $1, the little girl explained to the saleswoman. There was so much pleading in the girl's eyes. The expression on the child's face trembling, the thin voice. It all moved Stephen. He couldn't just pass by now. He had to find out what this was all about. A rose costs $1.50. In an indifferent tone, the saleswoman began to list. Peony $1.03. Carnation $1.20. You don't even have 40 cents for the cheapest flower. How am I supposed to sell it to you if you're offering to invest it for you? Well, maybe there's something cheaper. Bent my girl, but look please, there are such flowers. There are, agreed the woman. They grow in the vacant lot behind the road. There's a field full of free flowers, and this is not charity. The girl did not give up, despite the cold, indifferent look of the woman and her rude words. You see, it's my mom's birthday today. I must bring her flowers. I have to. I do it every year. She's probably waiting. I can't disappoint her. Even a heart of stone would have trembled, but the saleswoman remained adamant. Are you suggesting that I pay out of my own pocket for you? She asked the little beggar of nice. If you have no money, then your mother will do. I'll draw her a card. I already sighed, girl. She realized that nothing here will not achieve. Her gaze faded, her skinny shoulders drooped. Stephen already knew that he was about to help this little girl. She's not even asking for herself for her mother. Most likely the child's parents are drinkers. The girl looks too neat. There's a hint of dysfunctional in her appearance. They may even be abusing her, and certainly not giving their daughter the attention she deserves. And the girl loves them anyway and wants to make her mother a birthday present. It's a nice surprise to give her a flower. Will the birthday girl appreciate the gesture? Probably not. It's just flowers, not a bottle. But that's not the main thing. The main thing is that the girl wants to make a loved one a pleasant thing. She asked for help from an adult, and he refused her, and even so rudely and peremptorily. Life has just taught the little girl another cruel lesson. No one in this world cares about you. I'm sure it's not the first, and it certainly won't be the last. I mean, Stephen. He suddenly wanted to show the poor child the other side of life, the one where there's room for miracles. The girl had already left the flower stall. She hung her head and walked up the street. And then a man called out to her, "Stephen, girl, you don't have enough for a flower." The little girl came back, gave the man an attentive outsider's look, just in case. That's right. At that age, children already understand that strangers are not to be trusted. Don't be afraid. Stephen tried to give his voice as soft as possible. I'd overheard you talking to the salesman. I can buy flowers for your mom. You don't encourage these beggars. The flower seller, hearing Stephen's words, turned to him with raised eyebrows. That's Kate, the granddaughter of an alcoholic. She doesn't even have a mom. She's lying. I have a mom. The girl's eyes glittered with anger. And it's her birthday today. If you don't know, don't say anything. What a rude bore. What do you expect from such people? They grow like weeds. No one takes care of them. The woman looked at Stephen for support. But he wasn't going to agree with the saleswoman. He was only looking at the girl. Let's pick out a bouquet for your mom. Thank you. Embarrassed little girl smiled at him, as if it was not she who a moment ago was seething with righteous anger. The saleswoman cast a chastising glance at Stephen and Kate wanted to buy for her mom the cheapest certain modest flower. I was just a little short of the money she needed for a simple carnation. Let's pick something better for your mom, Stephen suggested. Since I'm meeting you today, don't be shy. I've got kids myself. I would like them to take care of me and my wife when they grow up, like you do your mom. The girl smiled. Stephen realized from her look that she had already imbued him with the confidence of a bright, pure child. And what a beauty! Now the man got a better look at the girl and noticed how correct her facial features were. It was a pity her parents didn't realize what a treasure they had gotten. Kate hesitated, looking at the lush bouquets. She wanted to surprise her mom. It was noticeable, but the girl was clearly frightened by the price tags. Then Stephen took the initiative. Show us the most beautiful bouquets. The kind that would suit a young woman. She's got to gasp with delight when she sees the gift. You know what I mean? The saleswoman grinned wryly. What young woman? Kate doesn't have a mother. Her grandmother is raising her, and the girl's a sweetheart. Stop saying that about the kid, said Stephen, or show us your beautiful bouquet, or we'll go to the neighboring flower store and make a profit for them. These words had the desired effect. Who would refuse a customer willing to leave a tidy sum in your store? The woman laid out one bouquet after another in front of Kate. They were high-priced goods, and they looked like it. Stephen watched the girl's reaction carefully. The man saw that the flowers delighted and amazed the little girl. It was so easy to surprise and please her. Not spoiled children, which is a rarity these days. Finally, Kate's eyes flashed with such delight that Stephen immediately realized this was it. Yes, indeed, the bouquet was very interesting. The lilies were an amazing light blue shade, probably dyed, because Stephen doubted that flowers of such coloring could be found in nature. A lush bouquet of many flowers, and between them, like fairies or elves, fluttered not weighty graceful dolls of ballerinas. Such exquisite decor. Stephen, and admiring the bouquet himself, of course, the flowers. A doll. The best choice for a girl of that age. No doubt about it. Stephen paid for the bouquet and handed it to the girl. Kate's eyes lit up with such joy that the man's heart suddenly became warm and tight from the fluttering in his chest. He wanted urgently to do something else good. Thank you, the girl smiled. Looking at those flowers. They are very beautiful. You are welcome, said Stephen. Stay always as sweet and kind as you are, no matter what. Kate nodded, thanked again, and hurried towards the bus stop, cradling the bouquet in her arms. Now her gait was a different flying, almost dancing thing. It was a pleasure to watch this childish joy. You were wrong to believe her, shook her head saleswoman, but it's up to you, it's better for me. An expensive bouquet. Finally, the hut was on fire, which no one wanted to take for a fraction of the price. Wrap me up that bouquet of tea roses over there too. Stephen smiled at the woman. He was so light at heart that he didn't want to quarrel with the gloomy lady. It's for my wife. The oppressive feeling Stephen learned from the middle of the day for a while receded. But as the man approached the car in the parking lot, it returned again. And suddenly Stephen realized what was wrong. Well, of course, how could he forget? The birthday. The Kate girl had said it was her mom's birthday. Thanks to that child's words, Stephen now remembered that it was Kelly's birthday today too. While the man didn't realize that he still remembered that date, and that it still held such significance to him, Stephen sat down in the cabin, turned on the quiet, pleasant music, but did not hurry to start the engine. Thoughts, memories. They had already surrounded Stephen in their wire, and for some reason this time he didn't want to shrug it all off. Yes, everything about Kelly still resonated with pain, but there was room for light feelings. Kelly Stephen had met Stephen a long time ago when he first saw the girl. They were both about 8 years old. Little Stephen had been taken on summer vacation to his paternal grandmother's house. She lived in a remote neighborhood on the outskirts of town. 3-story old houses, overgrown with weeds, yards, the creaking of a bunch of swings. It was a very special world. Tranquil, full of sunshine, and the scent of sinewy grasses. Stephen had always liked Grandma Nana. She was so loving, so caring, and at the same time, unlike the same parents, did not give her grandson much more freedom. Here Stephen could walk outside from morning till night, returning home only to eat and exchange with his grandmother the news of the day. Especially the boy liked the fact that in the evenings, Nina did not watch TV in her room, but sat by her grandson's bed and told him fairy tales or stories from her childhood, to which he fell asleep so well. In Nina's grandmother's yard, Stephen had a lot of friends, of different ages, a cheerful company. They'd do anything they could think of. We played hide and seek, and built a tent, and climbed trees, and looked after all the local cats and dogs. It was fun, interesting, exciting. Any walk turned into a real adventure. For some reason, with friends in my parents' yard, it was not like that. Well, we'll go out. Well, in the ball play a little chat about this and that. And Nina's concession was just great company. It's a pity the boy was only brought here for vacations. His grandmother lived far away, so he couldn't travel every day. Stephen desperately missed both his friends and his grandmother. and always looked forward to being taken to his favorite place. The company changed from time to time. Some moved away, others, on the contrary, appeared. Therefore, Stephen was not surprised to see one day among the familiar children a new girl. "This is Kelly. She recently moved in with us," Kevin explained. "One of Stephen's longtime buddies." The boy nodded. Kelly smiled radiantly at him. She was so pretty in her face blue sundress and 2 pigtails dyed with blue ribbons. Something about this girl was different from the others Stephen knew. And it was not only her unusual name. By the way, the girl herself did not like the name very much. "Stupid something something," complained. She frowned at the dark eyebrows. "Are not real, as if. I'd rather be called Maria or Kate. That's a wonderful name," argued Jenna to neighbor Nina. "If they called me that, I'd be happy. Sounds like a queen. That's why my mom named me that," Kelly explained with a grumpy tone in her voice when she found out she was having a daughter. She decided that a girl should be a queen, and she picked the right name. "She says that when I grow up, I'm going to marry a prince." The children laughed. Kelly laughed too, and Stephen thought, "I wonder what it takes to be a prince. The king and queen didn't already have one. But maybe that's not the only way." Kelly. She immediately became something special to the violinist. The boy loved spending time with her, loved taking care of her, protecting her from imaginary and real dangers. How proud Stephen had been of himself when he had once chased a huge stray dog away from the girl. Kelly was walking home from the ice cream stand, and this dog jumped out from behind the house. Unfamiliar stranger's dog. The kids in the neighborhood knew their own and weren't afraid of them. But this stranger had some fur in his eyes, and he was angry. A deaf growl. He moved toward the girl. Kelly froze with the ice cream, never got it to her mouth. She even seemed to turn pale. Stephen, he was sitting in the tree with Tony. The boys were arguing about whether or not it was possible to cross the globe in the 2 remaining months of vacation. Without a second thought, Stephen jumped out of the tree. No, he'd never been with a boy, but this was about Kelly. And that girl had had some kind of weird effect on him from the beginning. Or had it just come from? Stubby Stephen grabbed a cobblestone from the ground and went straight for the dog. "Thank you," smiled Stephen Kelly. He didn't even know what to say out of joy and pride. Probably since then, Kelly began to treat Stephen in a special way. She smiled at him a lot. Always tried to be on his team during the games. Even defended Stephen to the girls when they tried to slander him. As time went on, the kids grew up. And now they are already teenagers, 14 to 15 years old boys and girls. Noisy games are behind them, like hide and seek caught up in the trees. No longer put in the sandbox. You can't build a castle. It was kind of sad. Things got a little more complicated. Now the girls, whom Stephen had known since childhood, took every word or look of the boy as a sign of his sympathy. He had to watch himself carefully to invent topics for conversation. Stephen was saddened by the realization that childhood was gone and nothing would ever be the same again. It was good that Kelly hadn't changed much. Perhaps she was the only one of their company with whom Stephen did not feel awkward. Just as open as when he was a child. Just as natural. Not a shadow of coquetry or handsome. She even, unlike her friends, hardly wore any makeup. I didn't have to. Kelly was bright from childhood and without makeup. Dark eyelashes, black eyebrows, black cheekbones, and turquoise eyes shining like gems on a swarthy, beautiful face. Kelly was a real beauty. She was very different from the local girls. This was noticed by both the children and the adults. Of course, Kelly was well aware that she had a spectacular appearance, but she was surprisingly modest and easygoing girl. Didn't set herself up like her peers, didn't show off to the boys. Of course, Stephen was well aware that he was head over heels in love with his childhood friend. He was always thinking about her, waiting to meet Kelly. Even tried to draw her, although he never had any artistic talent. He never told anyone about his feelings. He even tried to hide them from himself. Stephen was afraid that if Kelly guessed, they would immediately stop being friends. Because he's far from a prince. And a girl like Kelly needs a boyfriend to match. How can he be a teenager with pimples on his cheeks? And no muscle? No, I'd rather Kelly think of him as her trusted, loyal, understanding friend. It's more familiar. There's no escaping Nina, of course. What kind of eyes does Stephen look at Kelly with? She's a good girl, the old woman shook her head. She's beautiful and smart. And I see the way Kelly looks at you. She likes you. Only a mother, for she'll never give her life and liberty, don't even hope. Wendy's not the kind of son-in-law you want. She wants a rich and wealthy husband for her daughter. And she's setting the girl up for it. The grandmother's words made a strong impression on Stephen. On the one hand, he was glad that Nina thought that Kelly looked at him in a special way. The boy didn't notice it himself. It seemed to him as if the girl of his dreams behaves the same way with everyone and with him, and with the neighbor's guy stove and with the girls. Friendly, smiling, always ready to support at least a kind word. On the other hand, Aunt Wendy, Kelly's mother, did evoke strange feelings. The woman. She was single, pretty, not as pretty, of course, as her daughter. No, there was something exquisite about Kelly, refined, noble, most likely by appearance. She took after the father she'd never known. Her mother, on the other hand, represented a very different kind of female beauty. A bright figure skater, loud, statuesque, bright red hair, always flashy makeup, provocative clothes. If she wore a blouse, it had to have a neckline. If skirt or pants, then by all means pull things in. Stephen remembered that even in her early childhood, Aunt Wendy had fed Kelly for looking like a gray mouse. All because her daughter didn't want to walk around with her long hair loose. The girl always kept it in a high ponytail. In Stephen's opinion, Kelly was good with all her hair, but her mother apparently thought otherwise. That's the kind of mom my neighbor Jenna sighed at. Kelly's mother buys her own makeup, but she refuses to use it. She says it's too bright. My mom won't let me wear makeup to school. I have to do my eyes and lips slowly in the entryway. Stephen just smiled. He thought Kelly was the prettiest girl in the world, whether she wore makeup or not. Yes, Kelly's mother did threaten a rich husband for her daughter. It was the only way out of poverty that this woman, who had spent her life working in a kindergarten cafeteria for pennies, could see. Where else would she go? No education, no connections. Thanks for that. Wendy occasionally tried to arrange her own destiny. Why? She was a good-looking woman, good-looking. I mean, she's had her fair share of suitors. But the contingent was not suitable, married, and not too well-to-do men with a lot of their own problems. So Wendy's only hope was for her daughter. Stephen had seen more than once the look the woman gave her beautiful daughter. The boy understood perfectly well at this very moment Aunt Wendy was comparing Kelly with other girls, her friends, and the comparison was clearly not in favor of the latter. Nina, too, had said more than once that Wendy wouldn't give poor Kelly peace of mind. Stuffing the girl's head with early marriage hunting for rich suitors, almost trying to find her some suitors herself. And Kelly's only 15. And she needs to learn a trade, get on her feet. Otherwise, she'll be like her mother. She'll spend her whole life living on the streets. I feel sorry for the girl. Can I do anything to help her? Stephen dreamed that when he became an adult and a wealthy man, which was bound to happen sooner or later. It is not for nothing that he is trying so hard to study, especially in technical disciplines. Stephen will be a sought-after engineer. He will have all the attributes of a prosperous life, a car, an apartment, a bank account. And that's when he'll propose to Kelly. And then, of course, he'll say yes. How could he not? They have such a great relationship. And Grandma says Kelly's got a special look in her eye for him. If only Aunt Wendy hadn't realized her devious plan to marry her daughter off to an unloved bigwig before this happy moment. Wendy's vigor was frightening. After a couple of years, Stephen graduated from high school just as the boy had dreamed. Once he entered college as an engineering major. Now Stephen was all grown up. He no longer went on vacation to his grandmother's house. But the boy went to his grandmother's house by himself. First of all, his grandmother had grown old. She often needed help, heavy bags from the store to bring home something to repair, and just talk to the old lady, her life to be. Elderly people lack communication and warmth. Secondly, Stephen did not want to part with his company of old friends. Relations between them were no longer so close. They all had their own affairs, their own interests. But still, sometimes they got together, and it was a great time. Childhood friends laughed, remembered the past, shared with each other news from their present lives. Of course, the main reason that Stephen so often appeared in that very courtyard was Kelly. The girl was studying at a construction technical school. Her mother decided for her daughter that it is not necessary to get a higher education, and Kelly herself thought that she would not be able to afford higher education. She studied at school very mediocre. She tried her best, but perhaps the girl needed tutors in her time. That would have done the trick, but her mother thought it was a waste of money. Aunt Wendy didn't choose construction school by chance either. The woman herself shared her considerations with her neighbor, including Baba Nina. She was quite proud of her practicality. There are a lot of boys studying at the construction college and children of rich parents. By the way, Kelly will also have someone to choose from. And if there is no worthy candidate, then with such a profession, girls and all the same male staff will get into some construction company. And there among the young and rich engineers she will be where to turn around. Grandmother passed these words to her grandson, sadly shaking her head. Poor girl, she sighed. After all, she does not have the nerve and courage to resist her mother. I don't like Kelly, though. I can see being at a funeral for grief, like Jenna. But no, quieter than water, lower than grass. Wendy all her plans through her daughter to realize dreams and does not think about what will happen to the girl her. Stephen felt hurt at the thought that he was still very weak and could do nothing to help Kelly, and his feelings for her were growing stronger year by year. The childhood crush had not gone away. Quite the opposite. The look in his favorite eyes, Kelly's gentle voice, her movements, her facial expressions. It was all a native, intimate attraction for Stephen. He tried, of course, to date other girls. The boy did not lack in female attention, and at school he had girlfriends. And then at university too. But none of these girls, among whom there were some real beauties, Stephen did not have such feelings for as Kelly. Kelly, she was polite, friendly to the guy, as she was to everyone in their company. Not with a look, not with a gesture. The girl did not show any particular favor to Stephen. The guy didn't understand how Nina had discerned any sympathy for him on her part. Maybe she was mistaken. Confess his feelings, the young man still did not dare. He was afraid that then between him and Kelly there would be awkwardness, misunderstandings, and even just friendly communication would become impossible. Kelly, one day she resolved all Stephen's doubts. It was on a very sad occasion. Nina had died. It was sudden. No one expected it. Grandma was still quite a robust, vigorous old lady. She had no health problems. And then, a neighbor came to ask her for salt and found her sitting on a chair in the kitchen, already cold. Heart. The first person the neighbors called with the tragic news was Stephen. He was Nina's most frequent visitor. Everyone in their neighborhood knew him. Many people came to the funeral, Nina's former co-workers and, of course, all the neighbors. They loved the kind old lady. Many cried sincerely because she was gone. Stephen was crushed by what had happened. Nina was a pillar of calm in this crazy world. Her apartment was Stephen's place of mental rest. He knew he was always welcome here. He was always genuinely welcome here. He had a special bond with his grandmother. The old lady and her grandson understood each other almost without words. Even with his parents, the boy was not so close. Stephen's old friends, of course, understood everything. They supported the guy, told him warm words about unification. All of them more than once sat in her kitchen, at the stove, pancakes with jam. When the guests dispersed, Stephen was left alone in his grandmother's apartment. His parents left to take the elderly relatives home. And there, Kelly entered the apartment without knocking. Stephen stared in surprise at the girl he had loved since childhood. I wonder why she was here. Maybe she wanted to express her condolences again. Who cares? The important thing is Kelly's right next to him. And they're alone. We should be savoring the moment, not brooding. You're not coming here anymore? The girl asked. Her eyes trembled slightly in her voice. They had so much longing, so much sadness. I don't know, Stephen wondered. I haven't even thought about it yet. What makes you think I won't come here again? Well, how could you? You came to see her, didn't you? She's gone, so you don't have anyone to go to? Are we never going to see each other again? And that's when Stephen realized that Nina was right. Kelly really does care about him, and now she's hurting that they'll never see each other again. This is the moment to confess her feelings to her. Stephen looked directly into the eyes of his companion and moved closer. I wasn't just visiting my grandmother, you know. I don't even know how to explain it to you, but I can't be without you. I need to see your eyes once in a while, hear your voice. Now it was Kelly's turn to be surprised. She looked at Stephen, batting her long, curved eyelashes, and seemed to be struggling to believe what she hadn't heard from just now. I don't understand. What was there to understand? Watching Kelly's reaction, Stephen became quite bold. There was no longer any doubt. The feelings between them were real, and they were mutual. Kelly hadn't said anything yet, but he didn't need to. The guy could see it in her eyes. He had known this girl for a long time and felt her very well. I love you and have been for a long time. Stephen smiled. The confession was incredibly easy and simple. Was it worth the silence? Kelly smiled back and kissed Stephen. He even got dizzy from their emotions. From then on, they started dating. Stephen would rush to the construction company where his girlfriend already worked after graduating from technical school. They did not get on the streetcar. They walked along the streets of the city, holding hands on foot, hugging each other. On the way, they stopped by cafes or generally wrapped up on the embankment, kissed, shared the news of the day, supported, embraced each other. They were good together. That's a fact. Only Kelly's mother's attitude toward this union snarled happiness. One day, Wendy caught the couple in the driveway. Stephen escorted the girl home, but the young people did not want to part at all. It was already dark. They were kissing, standing right on the porch. And that's when Wendy came out of the porch. "Is that why you were always late?" she exclaimed, giving the lovers an unkind look. Kelly folded. But Stephen looked into the eyes of his beloved's mother, openly and calmly. He knew he was doing nothing wrong. So why be embarrassed? "I thought you were really writing reports on the workplace, but you are. I mean, we've talked about this so many times. Mom, listen to me. I don't want to hear anything. Go home." Kelly looked helplessly at Stephen. He realized he had to protect her now. "Do something. I need to talk to you," he said seriously and impressively, as if he were a grown man. Wendy immediately responded to me too. "Not her. And you go home with you. I'll have a talk too, but later." Kelly gave Stephen another worried look, but the boy smiled cheerfully and winked at her. Let her think that he himself was not the least bit worried before the obviously unpleasant conversation with Wendy. "Look, when your daughter left," Wendy started to hate Stephen. "Get away from my daughter so you don't call her, text her again, much less go out with her." "But we're both adults," Stephen reminded her, working up the courage. "We're 19 years old. We can decide who we want to date." "Oh, you cheeky bastard." Kelly's mother's eyes poured with anger, and the boy realized he had to talk to her in a different way. He's not going to get anywhere with his parents. They're grown-ups. As long as Kelly lives in my house, she's my responsibility. And she's not old enough to be her own judge of character. Here I am. I see people, I know who's worth what, and I won't let my daughter make a mistake. Stephen very much wanted to remind this and the annoyed, unpleasant woman that the apartment is shared, and Kelly is already earning and supporting herself. So if you look at it another way, Wendy's wrong. Her daughter doesn't depend on her that much. But that's a technicality. In fact, her mother had a lot of influence over Kelly. Stephen saw that. So if he wants to be close to his beloved, he needs to be more careful. He needs to get in touch with his wife. "Do I know what you mean?" Stephen said humbly, trying to appear as respectful and obedient as possible. Surely a girl like Kelly deserved a better lot than a life in this bedroom community. And living from paycheck to paycheck. And you're not as naive a fool as you thought you were. Wendy nodded condescendingly. "I thought you were going to start telling me about love. That's all well and good, but it's only when you're young that you realize it later. But the thing is," Stephen continued, "the thing is, I'm not a bad option either. I didn't like to talk about myself as a commodity on the market. But what could be done?" Kelly's mother only understood that kind of language. You grinned at Wendy. She continued to be haughty and unapproachable, but at least she wasn't yelling anymore. And kind of ready to talk. You're a good one. Yeah, I know your family. You live in a small apartment. Parents work from paycheck to paycheck. You have a mediocre car, not exactly destitute. But Kelly needs something completely different. You see how beautiful she is, her youth, her beauty, her ticket to a happy future. Too bad Kelly doesn't realize that. But for now, she'll thank me later. She needs a man who does not count money, flies to foreign resorts, lives in a beautiful house with a large garden and a swimming pool. Where can you get a prince like that? Stephen knew, of course, that Wendy's mother dreamed of giving her daughter to a wealthy man. Wealth there something else is the defining criterion of choice for this woman. Wendy was never particularly secretive about it. She had set her daughter up for such a life, such a destiny, since childhood. But to declare so blatantly and openly her not-so-pretty desire, Kelly was just a big financial project for Wendy. The woman had failed to make her own destiny, so now she was trying to move into a beautiful life at Kelly's expense. And her daughter's dreams and desires were completely disregarded. I'm studying at a prestigious engineering school. Stephen began to fight for his happiness again. He realized that he had to present himself in Wendy's eyes as a promising young man. You know, the employers pick up graduates from there in their final years. So I will have a good job very soon, and therefore a salary. I will be able to provide for my family and provide adequately. Kelly and I love each other and will be happy together. And of course, we will never need money. You will, you won't. It's all in the wind. Right now you're a poor student, a pauper. Look at you. Where are you, and where is she? Such beautiful girls are not for you, at least not yet. Don't you have enough girls at the university? Take the easy option from my daughter. Leave me alone. Leave her alone. Otherwise, I'll have to go to my people. And they'll give you the worst kind of talk you'll ever get. Stephen knew it wasn't an empty threat. Wendy had many admirers among men of decidedly low morals to please her queen. They wouldn't hesitate to mob the guy, trap him somewhere in a dark alley. Stephen was not afraid of that. It was the other thing. The guy realized that all his efforts to reason. Kelly's mother was useless. There was no way she would approve of her daughter's union with him. No matter what he said or did. Kelly's own words don't matter to Wendy either. Kelly won't go. She's against her mother's wishes right now. Too long and skillful Wendy had been processing her all these years. There's been a lot of manipulation. I've carried you alone, raised you nightly and without sleep. Your disobedience breaks my heart. If you go against my will, it will drive me to my grave. Stephen knew all this from conversations with his beloved. Think of Kelly, Wendy continued hatefully, looking at Stephen. Think of the future of the girl you claim to love. Is she going to live a miserable existence with you? She could have a very different life. She has everything she needs to be a rich man's wife. Don't bother her, just walk away, leave her alone. Stephen turned around and walked away in silence. Then there's no point in talking to Inna any further. She's like a parrot stubbornly saying the same thing. Kelly needs a rich life partner. Stephen can't make her happy. The guy's spirits were heavy after that dialogue. He immediately called Kelly. Her voice always worked wonders with him, developed moping and bad mood. But the girl's phone was disconnected. Wendy had done her best. It had worked in advance. As a child, this woman had seemed strange and incomprehensible to Stephen. Now the guy realized that she was a real monster using her power over her grown-up daughter. Keeps her on an invisible leash, and they don't even realize that they're crippling Kelly's life. All night long. And the next day, Kelly's phone was disconnected. Stephen was worried. He'd been on pins and needles all day. After the lecture, the guy, as always, went to Kelly's office to finally see her. But as soon as Stephen appeared on the porch of the construction office, he was grabbed by the hands of two men from both sides and dragged somewhere. The guy realized what was going on. Wendy had finally carried out her threat to give him a bad talking to if he didn't leave Kelly. "What are you doing wrong here?" asked one of the men, hugging Stephen with a whiff of aged booze. Definitely a Wendy fan. They're all the same. Were you warned not to come here? The other one asked, and then Stephen burst into tears. He twisted out of the hands of the escort, began to shout in their faces, curses, and insults. He was outraged by the whole situation. The emotions that had bought him this 24 hours were pouring out. They beat Stephen then. Probably at first, the men he had taught them wanted to do without it. But Stephen got a little too violent. The guy was getting hit. He tried to fight back. Only it was useless. What can a 19-year-old, not a sporty young man do against two grown men? His whole body ached. Blood poured down his face. It looked like two scumbags had broken his nose. But none of that mattered. What mattered was that Stephen finally understood. Wendy had the power to stop him and Kelly from seeing each other. She'd won. Well, almost. Apparently, the woman saw Stephen as a threat, a real threat to all her plans. Wendy must have talked to her daughter and realized that she, too, was in love with the poor student. And that was dangerous. Very dangerous. Of course, the two lovers would figure out a way to be together. So Wendy decided to separate them in any way she could. That way her influence over her daughter was maximized. Stephen tried to get up to run to Kelly's house. After all, the girl would come home sooner or later anyway. Here he would intercept her. He really needed to talk. Stephen will convince Kelly to leave her mother, explain to her what a monster Wendy is, and how she skillfully manipulates her daughter. The only way he can do that is to see Kelly. Then everything would fall into place, but his legs wouldn't hold the boy up. To his surprise, he found he was too weak to get up. Gee, from impotent anger and pain, both mental and physical. Stephen cried right there on the cold pavement. Then they found him. The dog ran into the alley, smelling a man, and its owner came running after it. When the girl saw the guy against the wall, she was horrified. She immediately called the police and an ambulance. Stephen was in the trauma center for a long time. He was diagnosed with several fractures, a concussion, and bruises to his internal organs. Wendy's buddies did their best. By the way, they never found the attackers. Stephen frankly told the police who conducted the interrogation about his conflict. Kind of investigators dug in that direction, but no connection was found. In the end, the version according to which Stephen found himself in the path of ordinary street hooligans became determinative. The guy, of course, knew it wasn't true, but there was no proof. For almost a month, Stephen physically could not meet with his beloved, but as soon as he was discharged from the hospital, he immediately went to Kelly. The old wounds had not healed completely, but the guy was ready to get new ones. He would give anything for a single meeting with his favorite girl. Kelly's cell phone was dead. Clearly, Wendy had her daughter change the number. The girl wasn't on social media either. Stephen saw her. Then he was just coming out of the corner when he noticed a luxury Mercedes stopped at the entrance where Kelly lived. The boy's heart clenched in alarm. He immediately realized that the expensive foreign car was here for a reason. Stephen pulled up behind the mighty truck. From there, he could see everything that was going on. Kelly came out of the driveway, hand in hand with her mother. Wendy was bursting with pride and joy. She was dressed bright and flashy and decorated like an Indian on the warpath. Kelly looked dressed up as well. Her loose, slightly developed hair pulled back from her white dress, emphasizing the graceful lines of her figure, elegant high-heeled shoes. Except that the eyes were somehow too sad and frightened even. Mother and daughter got into the car, and the Mercedes drove off somewhere, and Stephen remained standing under the very tree from which he had once jumped, saving Kelly from a dog. The boy did not know then that he was seeing his beloved for the last time. It seemed to him he still had time to fight. Yeah, Wendy had clearly started her plan. Looks like she's even found or is trying to find a fiancé for Kelly. Maybe it was a rental car for a trip to a restaurant where rich suitors flock. Wendy decided to make a splash, so she made an appearance. Stephen. One would have hoped that all was not lost. The guy came home that night in a terrible mood. There was a clear plan in his head, but it was as long-term as possible to get on his feet, to make himself worthy of her daughter in Wendy's eyes. A groom needs time, and it's so short, it's almost non-existent. Wendy's already been very active. Kelly called Stephen herself a couple of days after he had observed the scene in her driveway. "Kelly, where are you? How can I see you?" Stephen bombarded his beloved with questions. He hadn't expected to hear Kelly's voice on the phone, taking the call from an unfamiliar number. It wouldn't work. The girl's voice sounded muffled and sad. "And it's dangerous now." "Why?" "I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of your mother's friends at all. It's more serious than that. I never should have recruited you. It's dangerous. But I wanted to hear your voice. One last time." "What do you mean, one last time?" "I'm getting married and moving far away from here to another country." "Why? Where? How will I find you?" "No, I won't say that. It's dangerous. I just wanted to hear your voice and tell you that you're good. You're the best in the world. I want you to be happy. I really do. Do it for me." "Kelly, wait." The phone buzzed briefly. Of course, Stephen immediately dialed the same number, but the caller, quite expectedly, was unavailable. Without wasting a second, Stephen hailed a cab and raced to Kelly's house. He knocked on her door, pressed the bell button into the wall to no avail. There was no one in the apartment. Stephen's emotions were raging inside. He had to do something, to run somewhere, to save Kelly. But where? Where was she, this princess in need of a hero? Who to fight? Stephen turned to the first bar he could find and drank himself into oblivion. It dulled the pain a little, but in the morning it came back double. The hangover was compounded by a bad hangover. Stephen searched for Kelly, or at least some information about her. A long search in vain. I did find something, of course, but it was very scanty. The guy went to the construction bureau, where she worked, but there he was told that Kelly quit almost a month ago. Oh, how lucky Kelly was. Shared impressions of one of the girl's left colleagues. She found herself a rich fiancé. Now you don't have to work at all. I saw it on what car he took her away from here. Where are they gonna live? Kelly didn't say that. No, for some reason she didn't. She just said it was in another country. It's a mystery, but she wasn't exactly secretive about it. We're thinking maybe she married a government official or a world-famous celebrity. Why else would she be so mysterious? In the canteen where Wendy Stephen worked, too, nothing could be found out. They gave him the same answer. She got what she wanted, married her daughter off to a rich man. The man took them somewhere else in the country. Wendy didn't tell anyone where we were going, and it didn't matter. She was as happy as a child. Her eyes were sparkling. She must be a very wealthy son-in-law. She bragged that she wouldn't work another day. She looked at us like we were her servants. Isn't that what money does to people? Before she's even lived a rich life, she's already put herself above us mere mortals. Neighbors Wendy and Kelly didn't have the information Stephens wanted either. Jenna, who always knew everything, was in the dark. Oh, Step, it all happened so fast. I didn't have time to realize anything. Wendy Kelly suddenly took it in stride. She wouldn't even let us go out with her. She used to stay home all the time like a recluse. Then I noticed the Mercedes started picking them up. It's an expensive model. I looked it up online, and Wendy and Kelly were always so dressed up in it and Arena. Kelly didn't tell you anything at all. Stephen looked at Svetlana hopefully. No. The girl shook her head. Her phone was not answering. She didn't go on social media. One day I saw Kelly walk into the entryway alone without her mother. That's unprecedented lately. Naturally, I ran out of the apartment, caught up with her on the stairs, wanted to ask her questions. But then Wendy jumped up and yelled at me. Why? I didn't do anything wrong. I grabbed Kelly and dragged her home. I've gone all crazy. I realized I'd found a rich guy on Kelly, just like I'd always dreamed of on the internet. I probably saw Wendy surfing the web on her phone more than once. But I thought she was just looking for herself sometimes. And what was she doing? She was doing it for her daughter. Stephen tried looking for Kelly, but nothing came up. She never contacted him again. Well, it was a depressing picture. Wendy had found a rich man, apparently a foreigner of some sort, an opinion of her daughter. This woman, as usual, didn't take it into account. Kelly. She was too weak to stand up to her overbearing mother. And Stephen wasn't around. He would have talked Kelly out of it. Maybe Wendy was right. Kelly now lives a very different life. She has travel, jewelry, brand name things, a huge house, swimming pool, money to fulfill all her desires. Could Stephen have provided his beloved with such a life? Of course not. Not even in the distant future could he become that wealthy. One day, Stephen realized that Kelly could be forgotten. She's living in the middle of nowhere with no one. No one knows where the girl's gone. Her rich husband. You're gonna have to get used to this new reality. It's been hard. At first, Stephen physically longed for Kelly. His feelings pressed down on him like a slab of rock. I didn't even want to get out of bed in the morning. Then Stephen got used to it. No, the longing didn't go away, but life became easier. The guy was surprised to realize that he could enjoy simple things again. Delicious food, walks with friends, watching interesting movies, reading books. Studying was also saving him. Stephen plunged headlong into lectures and seminars, which of course paid off. Many years passed, Stephen was already a leading engineer in a large company. An apartment, a car, a bank account. He had all the trappings of a wealthy man. Perhaps now Wendy herself would consider him worthy of Kelly's attention. Or maybe not. Wendy ended up marrying her daughter off to a foreign millionaire. Stephen wasn't quite up to that level, though. Stephen kind of forgot about Kelly, put the whole thing behind him, and yet there was still hope in the back of his mind. The hope that one day he and Kelly would meet. She'd see what Stephen had achieved and be happy for him. Maybe now that she was an adult, she was finally out of her mother's influence. Who knows, maybe Kelly doesn't have real feelings for her husband. It's even more likely. After all, this marriage only happened under pressure from Wendy. What kind of love is there to talk about? Growing up, Kelly realizes she's done something stupid, gets divorced, and goes back to Stephen. The boy tried to keep those thoughts out of his head. They were no good, and yet it was so pleasant to dream of the forthcoming meeting. Of course, Stephen had had occasional romances. They had been very pleasant and sometimes even funny adventures. But he never wanted to tie his fate with any of these girls. Probably having once experienced real and deep feelings, Stephen simply did not agree to lesser ones. And then suddenly, out of the blue, it's terrible news. Stephen didn't read the local public, so he found out all about it from Jenna. That's how childhood friends kept in touch. They called each other and occasionally wished each other happy holidays. Have you seen this yet? The friend's voice sounded extremely excited. I've seen what Stephen didn't understand. It's horrible. It's like Kelly's husband sent her to the afterlife. They're not naming names, but they posted pictures of both the husband and his victim. It's Kelly, I'm telling you. Especially since it says the victim's from our town. Give me the link, Stephen asked, feeling his legs getting younger. It's too scary to be true. Jenna, she is such a fussy shebang. She must have made a mistake. She'll do it. All right, I'll drop it right now. Stephen hesitates to follow the link for a long time, already putting his finger in to open it, but then removing it again until he sees everything with his own eyes. There is still hope. He did. Saw it, was horrified. Yes, that picture was Anna Kelly. Grown up, changed, but there could be no mistake. Her eyes dark, her hair slightly waving, her arms, her graceful neck, her frail shoulders. Kelly was smiling in the picture, but her eyes were full of sadness and longing. Stephen noticed it at once. It was scary to read the phrase under this photo, a picture of a victim. Stephen took a long look at Kelly before he started reading the article itself. From what it said, refrigerator, legs, blood and veins from the rear, turns out. Then Kelly married a successful businessman from the Arab Emirates. Somehow he got wind of his business in their town. Well, there are some big oil and gas companies here. Basically, it's not surprising that this sheikh was working with someone local. I'm sure Wendy knew about it somehow. She had a goal of marrying her daughter off to a rich man, and here was such a foreign bird. Stephen didn't know how Kelly's mother managed to pull the scheme off. The woman must have found a wealthy suitor on social media. Jenna had told him about it at the time, but she could hardly have known for sure. Anyway, Wendy realized her dream and introduced her daughter to this businessman. Tom, of course, liked the young beauty with the huge eyes. He probably liked her demeanor too. Modest, quiet, not decisive. That's the kind of mother Kelly made. The perfect wife, obedient. You can't expect scandals and surprises from such a woman. Kelly moved in with her husband in a foreign country, and it's unlikely she was happy there. Judging by the look on this one. Kelly photo. In this photo was dressed stylishly and expensively. Her neck was adorned with a clearly not cheap necklace. On the wrists shine Kelly massive bracelets, and the look sad and sad on the lips a smile. And she herself is almost crying with longing. Stephen's heart even clenched when he suddenly remembered the girl's shining eyes and her genuinely cheerful laughter. With him she had been quite different. What a fool he had been to think that he could not make her happy just because he did not possess the wealth of this foreigner. One had to fight for one's love with all one's might, casting aside doubts. It seemed to Stephen now that he had not done enough then. Kelly lived as her mother had once dreamed in a palace. It seemed Wendy lived somewhere nearby. All this Stephen learned from the article. The couple had a daughter. There was no picture of the baby in the article. Stephen hoped that the girl looked a lot like Kelly because her husband looked like a black raven in the photo. The gaze cold, predatory. Eyebrows furrowed in a frown, and that was the kind of man Kelly had lived with for so many years. How did he feel about her? Judging by his face, the man was hardly capable of tenderness, care, sensitivity. Kelly. After all, she needed it all like air. She was, without a doubt, very, 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 very unhappy in her golden cage. The article talked about the fact that the couple often had disagreements on domestic grounds. It's understandable, the side is Muslim. Different customs and different ways of doing things. Kelly didn't even know the language. Maybe she learned it later, but at first she couldn't even get a word in edgewise with anyone. Isolation. Language barrier, overbearing and unkind husband by my side. It's horrible. Disagreements arose, of course. Kelly was used to dressing and behaving a certain way. Her husband demanded something very different from her. Kelly must have tried to please her husband in every way to avoid conflict. It was in her nature. But apparently she had occasional lapses, for which her husband punished her. And one day the man let his fist loose to such an extent that Kelly could not be saved in the hospital. He had probably abused her before, but it was all kept secret. Family's a mystery, and now it'd be hushed up. They'd make it look like an accident. Kelly's husband could afford it. He had the money and the connections. Except the ladies of the Muslim Women's Rights Society stepped in. One of them worked at the very hospital where Kelly was brought. She immediately went to the media. The story became a sensation. Kelly's husband received the punishment he deserved. He was proven guilty, and the scoundrel was sent to prison. This story on the site was presented in the way that it is not worth Russian young girls should not dream of marriage to a foreigner. Look at Kelly threatened a beautiful life. And it turned out so sadly. Stephen was infuriated by such a pitch. The man who wrote the articles. He knows absolutely nothing about Kelly. Absolutely nothing. She never dreamed of a rich suitor. That was her mother's goal. Wendy, that's who's to blame. Stephen tried to imagine how the woman must be feeling right now. Pushing her daughter into the clutches of a monster with her own hands. Didn't she see who her future son-in-law was? Even from the photo, it is noticeable that this is a cold, unpleasant man. Where the wealth of an entrepreneur clouded Wendy's brain with money. That's what she was all about. Well, maybe India was doing pretty well for herself. She certainly had money. Except that it was Kelly who provided this trouble-free existence. Something her mother probably preferred not to think about. And now the girl has paid with her life for years of affluence. By the way, Wendy was left with nothing. Probably the Kelly girl was taken by her relatives, spouse. At least the article said that all the property went to them while the criminals served their sentences. Wendy ended up left at a broken trough. Lives there. Stephen was in a strange state of mind for a long time. Apathy replaced by unbearable heartache. Squeezing out tears and not letting up. The man at that time constantly remembered Kelly, then small with pigtails and bunched knees, then young and beautiful. Their walks, their kisses, their conversations about everything. It was beautiful and right. It should have grown into something more, but it didn't. Both of them were too weak and inexperienced at the time, and couldn't resist Wendy, who persevered towards her goal, getting used to the fact that Kelly was no longer anywhere in this world at all. It was hard. Yes, the beloved was not there for Stephen, but he knew that she lived somewhere far away and perhaps even happy. There existed the hope of a meeting, of communication, maybe even a relationship. Little did life direct, but now it's impossible. The pain of losing a loved one was compounded by guilt. Stephen repeatedly replayed in his head the events of many years ago and tried to understand where he had made a mistake, how he should have acted to save the girl. After all, surely he could have done something. There must have been something he could have done, but he gave up too soon. During this difficult period, Stephen didn't know how to live. He began to drink a lot. He would go to a bar after work and would not leave until he was drunk out of his mind. Did that help dull the pain for a while? Sure, but still. In the morning, beer spilled, eyes watering. Stephen would go to work. Of course, those around him immediately noticed that something was wrong with him. Colleagues, friends, relatives, familiar people were concerned about Stephen's behavior, tried in their own way to help him. They were only annoying. Stephen felt himself unworthy of their help and sympathy. He didn't deserve such good treatment. That's why the man snapped at those close to him, scorned those who tried to pull him out of the state. Let them know what a terrible person he really is. The loss of his job, high salary, benefits, and bonuses loomed. Stephen didn't care. He understood the boss, who needs such a worthless employee. He didn't think about the future. He wouldn't starve to death. He'd go to work as a janitor or a car wash if the pressure got to him. And at this difficult moment in his life, Daria appeared. She worked as a waitress in a bar where Stephen often visited. The girl realized that something serious had happened in this man's life. He didn't look like a regular drunk. Not at all. But she didn't even ask questions. She saw that the man was having a hard time. She acted differently. A kind smile, a working gaze, a casual touch, appropriate jokes. That's how Daria kept a regular visitor with eyes full of pain and remorse. The girl was a good judge of character. She saw that in front of her was a good person with a complicated fate or life drama. She did not even notice how she fell in love with Stephen. She waited for him impatiently to exchange a few phrases, to support him instead of beer. She offered him light cocktails. Sometimes the man even agreed. Gradually, he got used to the friendly waitress. They sometimes talked for hours about everything in the world. Stephen told her one day about something that had happened in his life. Daria was horrified. She was touched by the fate of a stranger, Kelly. The girl even cried over her story. What finally conquered Stephen? "You understood me, as no one is shocked," said the man, looking at Daria. That power under his gaze, and dreamed only that this moment lasted as long as possible. Others say forget it. You can't get her back and all that. And you cry. I'm crying in my heart too, crying nonstop. Why? Why only in the shower? You have to release those emotions, or they'll eat you up inside. It's dangerous. That night, Stephen cried. Tears were rolling down his eyes. Daria was sitting next to him, but her presence did not embarrass him. On the contrary, it was even easier for the man. Surprisingly, Stephen actually felt better. Are you some kind of magician? The man said, covered Daria's narrow palm with his hand. They began to meet. Daria could not believe her happiness. She realized, of course, that Stephen's feelings for her were quite different. They were little like those he had felt for Kelly. But Daria didn't care. He was there for her. Stephen was living with Daria. She helped him realize that his life went on. There's still room for happiness, strong emotions of joy. The man stopped drinking because reality no longer seemed so frightening. He was not alone now. Nearby was a man who understood him like no one else. Daria listened to Kelly's stories, silently catching every word. She wasn't jealous. No. Together with Stephen, the girl worried about Kelly's fate, sympathized with her, and resented her mother's behavior. A few months later, Stephen proposed to Daria. Why drag it out? The man realized that he wanted to be near her always. Of course, Daria happily agreed. She had long been in love with Stephen and perfectly understood that she could make him happy. With the birth of children decided not to delay, but quickly become parents did not work out. Several years of infertility. Doctors were throwing up their hands. Finally, we tried IVF. And on the first try, we had twins. The ultrasound showed that the family would soon have 2 sons. Stephen and Daria were delighted to find out. Except that Daria immediately said that they would have to have a daughter in the near future. It would be better to have 2 at once, of course. But that's just the way it is. But the doctors weren't too encouraging. During the pregnancy, Daria's health problems were discovered in the clinic where she was observed. They advised her to stop with twins. Only she really wanted a daughter too. Daria hoped that all health problems were solvable. When the boys were born, Daria and Stephen were learning to be parents together. It wasn't always easy, but they seemed to be doing well. Stephen thanked fate for sending Daria to him at the right time. He couldn't imagine what he would be now if it weren't for her. But as it was, he was a happy husband, a father, a model family man, a wonderful worker. About Kelly, Stephen tried not to remember too painfully, too hard and agonizingly acute pity for her, guilt, and a sense of irreparable loss. But sometimes the past still reminded him of himself. Like now, it was hard on the soul. Did Stephen have no idea why until he met this little girl? The little girl wanted to buy flowers for her mom's birthday. And then the man remembered that today was Kelly's birthday. That date must have stayed in his subconscious forever. Once, when he was still a child, Stephen used to save money for a present for Kelly in advance, and then buy bitter cheap dolls or plastic nooks. Kelly was always genuinely pleased with these girls, and her beautiful smile made the giver himself happy. Wendy never organized for her daughter holidays on this day. Either there wasn't enough money, or she didn't want to bother with nonsense. Stephen often went to the birthday parties of the neighborhood kids. Kelly had been to these birthday parties too. And once she confessed to her friend that she herself would like such a celebration with friends, with a cake, with candles, fried chicken, and a liver salad. Such a simple childhood dream, which Wendy never bothered to fulfill. She paid little attention to her daughter's wishes at all, believing that she herself knows how she would be better off. Is that what this was leading to? Stephen went back to the flower stall and bought another bouquet of daisies, as delicate and exquisite as Kelly herself. He knew where the grave was of his beloved, and had even been there. But only once. More often, he just couldn't. It was too hard. For a long time, Stephen thought that the girl was buried in the country where she had found her doom. But then Jenna told him that, as it turned out, the women who had made a fuss in the press at that time organized Kelly's return to her homeland. They felt that she herself would have wanted it. And now her grave is in the local cemetery. That's where Stephen went with the bouquet. He thought it was a sign to see the girl on a day like this. But he didn't go to the cemetery right away. First he came home, dropped off his shopping, gave Daria some flowers, and took care of the little ones, and then Stephen told his wife directly where he was going. So of course, she understood him. How could she not? Daria, she's like that. And an object grave. The man found immediately the day he and Sveta visited. This place is firmly etched in his memory. Every turn, every fork. The scheme of the passage was in Stephen's head. Here was the humble grave of the millionaire's wife. Someone's obviously looking after her. I wonder who? Wendy's back or one of Kelly's friends visiting? We should ask the light. Maybe she's the one who cleans the place. Jenna and Kelly were very friendly when they were kids. What is this? Stephen couldn't believe his eyes at first. On the grave of his beloved, he saw a beautiful bouquet. Blue ballerina lilies. This very bouquet Stephen had bought a few hours ago for a girl who wanted to please her mother on her birthday. He understood everything. Remembered the eyes of the girl he had seen just a short time ago, her gaze. The movement's mimicry. In facial features, the little girl did not resemble Kelly. But there was something elusive in her appearance, something that left no doubt. This girl was the daughter of the one Stephen had been in love with since childhood. So Kelly's daughter wasn't taken by her husband's relatives. Then who's the girl living here with? Wendy has no one else. The man suddenly remembered the words of the flower seller. The unfriendly woman claimed that the girl had no mom, just a grandmother. So most likely Kelly's daughter. Some live somewhere near where Stephen bought the flowers. They're known there. The man stood by Kelly's grave for a while longer. Yeah, everything matched. There was no picture date name. Maybe it was for the best. Seeing the face of a loved one in a place like this was too much to bear. She was already closing up store. When she saw Stephen, she was surprised and frightened. The sales clerk said in a stern voice, "No refunds or exchanges." A man approached her with a determined stride. So that's what she's worried about because the customers didn't like her bouquets? No, that's not what I wanted to talk to you about. At first, the woman was reluctant to tell the stranger the girl he bought the flowers for. But bills work wonders. Seeing the banknote in Stephen's fingers, the woman revived and became much more sociable. Yes, she often sees this girl here, usually alone, sometimes with her grandmother. That grandmother is rarely sober, usually barely dragging her feet and barely moving her tongue. It is obvious that this way of life the old woman leads for a long time. Strange, but the girl with such a relative is good. What's that? She's polite and tries to look nice. With such an upbringing is more than surprising. The saleswoman shook her head. I feel sorry for her. Kate is so human. The women who live around here, they told me about this family. 2 of them, they come from far away. They don't have anyone else. We moved into a half-basement den in their apartment. The girl's kind of an orphan. Something happened to her mom. What kind of thing? Neither one of them would say. Doesn't matter, it's the father. Well, it's not uncommon for children to not know their father, but where do they live? Stephen asked the big question. He needs to find Wendy no matter what. Not far from here, in that yard with the green roof. 12th floor. It's the tallest one here, you can't miss it. Stephen found them that same night. Wendy was sober, but clearly hungover. The salesgirl wasn't fooled. Indeed, everything about her appearance suggested a drinker. It was hard to recognize in the drooping older woman Wendy, who was always meticulous about her appearance. But Stephen certainly recognized the familiar features, and it had been clear before that a mistake was hardly possible. And now Stephen had no doubt at all. Wendy was sitting on a bench in front of the entrance, and in a husky Markovich voice was saying something to 2 elderly women. They must have been her neighbors. The ladies exchanged mocking glances. Wendy was clearly not taken seriously, and that one either didn't notice it or didn't care at all. Stephen watched this scene for quite some time. Finally, Wendy's companions left, leaving her alone. Then the man approached her slowly, sat down on the bench opposite, and gave Kelly's mother an attentive look. She looked at him absent-mindedly at first. Then she remembered. Stephen saw that recognition in her eyes. The woman clearly understood who was now in front of her. Stephen said to Wendy, "What are you doing here?" "Do you recognize me?" Stephen nodded. I realized what a fool I was then. Too late. Wendy didn't need to ask questions. She had begun her confession herself. The woman must have thought about it often because her speech now flowed like a stream or a river. Kelly married a rich man. That's what I dreamed of when I was a kid. He came to our town on business, and I knew he was coming. An acquaintance told me, and I knew he was single and very wealthy. It was a chance. I thought at the time that this was the big moment for me and Kelly. I mean, she was so docile. All you did was ruin the picture for me. Getting in the way, giving her a headache with what I thought was a frivolous adolescent love affair. Well, that's why I called my buddies to help me talk to you, and they overdid it, I guess. Don't worry about it. I was really worried when you went to the hospital. Luckily, everything turned out all right with your health. Stephen nodded silently. He looked at Wendy and waited for the rest of the story. He needed to know what happened next. I was told which restaurant the bastard would be dining at. I'd set up his introduction to Kelly with my own hands. I got a waitress I knew to seat us at a neighboring table, and then I accidentally threw water on them both. I paid the waitress, of course, and a lot of money, but it worked. This situation brought my daughter and this rich man together. Wendy looked away with a misty gaze. Perhaps she was seeing scenes from the past, a moment in time where things could still be changed. I knew he was recently divorced, didn't I? His wife couldn't have children. Kind of knew that before the marriage, but she hid it. The man was in a dark mood. I mean, he'd been cheated. And here's Kelly, beautiful, modest, fragile, a delicate flower. Of course, she's hard to miss. This man took Wendy and Kelly back to his country. There was organized a lavish wedding, which struck the mother of the bride to the heart. She, of course, realized that her son-in-law is a wealthy man, but to such a fountains, fireworks, a crowd of invited guests. The celebrations featured stars that the woman had only seen on TV before. The son-in-law and his kin treated Kelly's mother with respect. They bought her an apartment with panoramic windows. Her card was regularly credited with large sums of money. Finally, Wendy was living the life her daughter had once dreamed of. She, too, lived in luxury. The house where Kelly lived with her husband was like a palace. The young wife did not have to do anything herself in the household. The servants did. Exactly. That's what happiness looked like to Wendy. But her daughter grew sadder by the day. She was paler, thinner, almost stopped smiling altogether. To her mother, Kelly said more than once that her husband considered her his property and did not see her as a human being, a beloved friend. She could not say what she thought, dress as she wanted to walk where it is pleasant and interesting to her. Often arguments broke out between the spouses over Kelly's behavior. Although it was hard to call it an argument, the husband simply said what he wanted Kelly to be, and this was to be obeyed. Sometimes it even got to the point of violence. It wasn't a big deal at first, as if Wendy was making excuses. You know, like pushing her arm or grabbing her arm roughly. I told my daughter it was a person of a different faith. That's how they do it. I assured her she'd soon get used to it. Then the couple had a daughter, and Kelly picked up a little bit. The child became her salvation in a foreign country. All her life was not wasted. The young mother channeled her tenderness into her baby girl. I thought my son-in-law would be happy now. After all, his old wife didn't give him a child. And here he got such a good girl. But he was disappointed. He needed a son. His relatives were also unhappy. As if Kelly had put a girl instead of a boy on purpose. I mean, you can't really tell. Kelly named the girl Kate, although Wendy suggested other more refined names for her granddaughter. Relatives of the baby on the father's side, but in the choice of name did not participate. The girl did not particularly excite their interest or enthusiasm. If there had been a boy and hair, it would have been a different matter. He was jealous, very jealous of her. Wendy continued in a completely different voice. You know how beautiful Kelly was, don't you? Men used to stare at her in the street. And her husband accused Kelly of being promiscuous for it, even though she didn't do anything at all. And he beat her. Kelly wouldn't admit it at first, but I noticed the bruises on her body. He wouldn't let us see each other at the end. He went crazy. I was afraid she'd complain to me, I guess. Wishing she was in her apartment with a delightful view. I always had money, even though I didn't work. But I didn't feel happy. Not at all. My heart ached. Even then I began to realize that I had pushed her into the hands of that monster for nothing. And then one morning, Wendy suddenly brought Kate, a little 5-year-old girl, something terribly frightened in the night. One of his relatives brought her in. Angry face, angry. Didn't say anything to me, just threw in that now I have to raise her. From the frightened granddaughter, Wendy could not get anything. She only cried and called for her mom. The girl was clearly in shock. Wendy did not know what to do. She cut off her son-in-law's phone, but he didn't pick up. Kelly didn't answer either. A foreign country with no friends or acquaintances. Language barrier. Wendy flitted around the apartment until evening like a frightened bird. She realized that trouble had happened to her daughter. But what exactly had happened? Where was Kelly? These were the questions that plagued the woman. Then I found out, of course, because the story was on TV first. Then there were articles in the newspapers. The case went viral. Turns out it was overblown, publicized. The criminal went to jail. My granddaughter and I were immediately abandoned by his relatives. The girl was not recognized as an heiress, and no one needed her there, although the relatives were not a boy. She and I were left on the street with no money. Kate and I were helped, bought tickets home, transported Kelly's body, and arranged a decent funeral for her. They even left us money for the first time, enough for this shanty town. And life until I got an allowance for myself and the child. What happened? Why did it all happen out of some strange jealousy? He must have been a sick man, I don't know. Claimed that Kelly loved someone else, thought about someone else, disrespected her husband, dreamed about lovers all the time. And it didn't happen. So he couldn't take it. He started hitting Kelly once. It wasn't uncommon, and just couldn't stop in time. That's what happened. Kelly exhaled at Stephen, clenching her fists. Why wasn't he there for her at such a terrible moment? It was all my fault, she shook her head. Wendy, you think I don't understand? Everything I understand perfectly well. That's why I drink sober. As soon as I sober up, it all piles up. Kachenko, it's just a pity. She's a good girl. What can I give her? But in the orphanage, probably even worse for her, they will hurt her there. Listen to me. Stephen looked straight into the eyes of Kelly's mother. He understood her state of mind. He'd been acting the same way after the terrible news, trying to dull the pain with drink. But Daria came into his life. She saved him, pulled him out of the black abyss. Blaming Wendy now for what she did years ago is pointless. What's important is this. Kate, what happens to her now? Stephen already had a plan. It remained to agree his son Guy, and of course, surrendered. Although the man had little doubt about his spouse's reaction. That evening, Stephen returned home. Late. Daria had already put the kids to bed and was drinking tea alone in the kitchen. She looked rather tired, but seemed happy. I'm sorry for leaving you alone with them. Stephen put his arm around his wife's shoulders. Usually he was in time for the evening procedures. Feeding and bathing put his sons to bed. Further at this point rested in the bedroom in front of the TV. That was the routine. Nothing. I knew right away something serious was going on. Were you so tense? It's okay now. I need to have a very serious talk with you. And Stephen told her everything. Kelly she knew, and that night she heard them continue their story. Then she suggested it herself. We have to get that Kate girl. We were thinking of a kid from the orphanage anyway. And this is the situation. And then you know how I've always wanted a daughter. Stephen smiled and stroked his wife's hair. It is a sunny, but very fresh, September morning. A light breeze blows in through the open window and moves the curtains. Stephen is trying to dress the twins in their holiday costumes. The boys are spoiled. They enjoy playing another fun game with their father. Daria could calm them down with one look, but she's busy right now, doing Kate's hair in front of the mirror in the hallway. Stephen can be reached by their murmurs of quiet laughter. They are having a good time together. Finally, the girl is ready. Stephen involuntarily admires the adopted daughter. Tall, slender, dressy, black, puffy, skirt, white blouse with sleeves, lanterns. Long hair by braided beautiful braids, in her hands a brand new satchel. Today is September 1, and Kate is going to a new school for the first time. Kate's facial features bear little resemblance to Kelly, but in her movements, her facial expressions are graceful. You can see her mother and Stephen in it all. It's nice to see the resemblance. Kate turned out to be a very nice and kind girl. She immediately found a common language with the twins. The father loved her older sister with all his soul. Daria and Kate became best friends. Finally, the woman was able to dress up the girl and make her beautiful hairstyles. And Stephen didn't give up, took her to a clinic. Doctors say that the case is neglected, but there is hope, except that the treatment required is long and serious. Well, is it worth it? Kate is very attached to her grandmother, and Wendy adores her granddaughter. The woman really loves Kate. Of course, she immediately realized that the girl would be better off in the Stephen family. And without a doubt, she gave custody of her granddaughter. Him and his wife. But what are the boys ready? Daria asked. The boys are ready. And as the girls are also on parade with a smile, Kate reported. Well, let's get going. Now to the line at school, and then to the trampoline center and children's cafe. Shared plans, Stephen. Yay, the children chorused.